I thought I'd do a bit of a dress rehearsal for Patrick Henningsen's kind invitation to chat tomorrow. And in this first part, I'd like to cover the strategic overview in terms of what is driving the multiple agendas we're seeing right now. Coverage by people such as the Duran, Earl Grey, Earl Grey, Defence Politics Asia, they're excellent. I follow them. I love following them. They're also excessive or too much, and they're also inadequate. They're inadequate in the sense that they don't actually cover the three levels above immediate government action and policy, which I'm going to touch on. They're aware of it, I'm sure, but they don't actually publicly disclose it, probably for good reason. They're excessive because once you understand what's going on from the highest level, you can actually just shrug your shoulders and say, well, it's just more chaos and control, and get on with your life and figure out how to thrive and survive. And that ultimately, I would suggest, is the dominant focus that we should be having in our lives. So the three levels are above the apparent level of control provided by government. Government, in a sense, represents itself as the caring face, doing its duty, protecting us, while pushing what we know to be fraudulent narratives. But that is the public face of what's going on and who's actually doing the controlling. One level above that, you've got what I'd call the immediate gratification, people who immediately benefit from their actions in the agenda. So if it's the pandemic, then it's Big Pharma selling us the vaccine. If it's war in Ukraine, it's the defense manufacturers selling us their products, having the government buy their products to give to the Ukrainians. And you might also include people like the EU who benefit from the control that they basically get, the expansion of the EU, the control they get to impose, etc. Behind going up to the level beyond that, and some of these you could argue a first level or second level, but the second level is less concerned about making money by selling product. They are interested in making money by changing the system. They basically have two agendas, whereby they benefit by implementing agendas that they believe in or that they profess to believe in, and they also tend to make money by the financial changes. So we're talking now about people, the bankers, World Economic Forum, Bill Gates somewhat, Soros, that kind of person. People like the neocons, I'm not sure where we'd put them, somewhere between the first and second level. They have a direct involvement in one particular agenda, being Ukraine. Their ideological allegiance is split between American imperialism or exceptionalism and support for a certain Middle Eastern nation. But they also have an ancestral ideological allegiance to their homeland, which was Russia, which of course they hate and they left. And that drives their hatred in Ukraine. At the second level, well, as I say, with the World Economic Forum, that sort of thing, what they're interested in is the kind of control they can impose without even asking us, without debating it, without it even being public. It's not secret, because it's being described and commented on by people like Earl Grey and others, or Neil McCoy Ward, and such. So it's not secret. but it certainly doesn't make it to the mainstream, and it is far more diabolical, and that might be a quite literal term, than the obvious threat of Ukraine or Big Pharma. That's where we're talking about zero carbon as an excuse to basically eradicate the Western industrial existence. So that's quite disturbing. And then one level above that, we have the families that nobody mentions. They never make it to mainstream. They barely even make it to what you might call alternative media. But they are the real movers and shakers, in the sense they are the R&R families, the wealthiest families on the planet. I suspect their declared wealth is considerably underestimates their real wealth. But they have a very different agenda. They are chaos and control. They understand that, or they have really no interest beyond anything which supports chaos and control, because from chaos you get the response of, clearly we need more control. And they basically regard the planet as their plaything. They own it, and we're not even the minions. The minions that serve them are the governments and the corporations who operate from selfish greed and personal ideologies. We are specks of dust, grains of sand on the beach. We simply do not factor, other than being the people to be played. So you've got those three levels, and once you understand that everything is about chaos and control, you appreciate that it actually doesn't matter what happens in Ukraine. Trying to understand how it can evolve, it's interesting. But just as with the 20-year war of terror, that was never about exporting democracy. It was about exporting chaos and taking down the enemies of Israel. Now, the neocons had that as a direct and published strategy. But to the highest level, the R&R families, it didn't matter. Well, maybe it does to a certain degree based on their own heritage. But the main thing was that as long as you continue to get chaos, as long as you continue to get disruption, as long as people like us continue to live distracted and in fear, that works for them. So that's the kind of the pyramid above government, the three levels above it. Now, what we're seeing at the moment is that, it was COVID, it's now Ukraine, but those are only the dominant agendas. In practice, there are so many agendas that it's hard to keep track, and it's certainly essentially impossible, unless you want to be full-time, to do any diligent research on each of them. But to name a few, you've got things like the fuel and food shortages, which are supposedly from Ukraine, but you've also got Bill Gates buying up all the farming. You've got a whole slew, at least 18 I think at the moment, of mysterious fires and even planes crashing into food processing plants. It looks a lot more like the powers that be want us to be in fear for the basic necessities for survival, and indeed they may be more than happy to have us not survive. This may be a convenient way of getting the population down. So you've got fuel and food, you've got inflation, as partly from money supply going up, but also by the shortages, the prices of the fundamentals are going to increase and increase. So that's going to erode our wealth and our well-being, and we're very poor at saving anyway, but once the prices start going up, we're going to be eating into our savings, having to make choices as to what we prioritize, fuel, as people have put it, whether to stay warm or have food this winter. And we're going to start seeing things like, we really can't keep up with the mortgage, and we've already got people like Vanguard and BlackRock buying up homes, hoovering up homes, and likewise banks in the UK hoovering up homes, and they're going to have a lot more homes available, and they're going to be a lot cheaper if people can't keep up the mortgage. So you've got that agenda. You've got things like LGBT causing us to question our identity and telling us we're wrong if we don't indoctrinate our children in frankly, adult issues at age 5 to 7. I mean, that's somewhere between insane and evil. Not to mention the many wars, the issues with paedophilia and in the elite, and stories that are, to us, certainly plausible and to the mainstream are not even touched upon. And then you've got things like the shootings and what have you. There are, and that doesn't even touch on the wars around the planet, what China is doing to hoover up resources and establish alliances in Africa. So it's too much for us to really track and stay ahead of. But as I say, if you can acknowledge that at the end of the day, it all serves the highest level agenda of chaos and control, you can somewhat shrug and say, yes, it's more of the same, and I'm going to be free to get on with my life. That's the thing that is most important, how to survive and thrive in this environment. So that's the first video, and I'll break it up into 3 or 4 videos depending. But there's the first part, the highest level overview of the players and their motivations.